Hey, everybody. Let me turn my volume up. Good to see you. If you're on here live, if you could say hi in the chat, that would be awesome. And if you're watching the replay, let me know that you're watching the replay. Hope you're having an awesome day so far. If you don't know who I am, I'm Cindy Baker, and I am an executive function coach, which means um, really about all things productivity. And I especially enjoy working with entrepreneurs who have ADHD or just those type of symptoms. That's sort of my specialty. So I empower people to overcome overwhelm and grow their businesses without burnout by managing their time, their energy, their focus. It's really all about focus. So welcome. Glad you are here. Um, Today, we're talking about something that I think almost every smart, capable, high achieving person has struggled with at some point, and that is knowing exactly what to do, but still not doing it. Guilty. I don't know how many of you have struggled with that, but you know what I mean. You know, the email that you need to send, the project that you need to start, um, the closet that you need to clean out, the habit that would help that you need to start developing, or the bad habit that you need to stop. You know, the conversation that you've been avoiding. Am I stepping on toes yet? um, and yet somehow it keeps getting pushed to tomorrow. Um, Here's what I want you to hear right from the beginning. This does not mean that you are lazy. Maybe when you were a kid growing up, your parents or your teachers said you were lazy. It does not mean that you lack discipline. It does not mean that you're broken. Most of the time, the problem is not that you don't know enough. The problem is that your brain is overloaded, emotionally taxed, distracted, or stuck in a maybe a in a system that was never designed for the way that you actually think and work. So today we're going to unpack what's really happening underneath the surface and talk about how to start building calm, focused momentum, one doable step at a time. Okay. Um, we're going to talk about how to close the gap without shame, pressure, or waiting to feel motivated. So let's start with the frustration of the gap. I call it the maddening gap because it can feel so confusing. And, you think about it all the time. You know what needs to happen. You may even find yourself just ruminating over and over in your brain about it. You may talk about it, write it down, pray about it, plan around it, and still not take action. And that's where the shame starts to creep in. And you start asking yourself questions like, why can't I just do this? Or what's wrong with me? Or why do I keep getting in my own way? And I've wasted another day again. I'm wasting time. I've got so much to do. The tricky part is that from the outside, this can look like procrastination. And procrastination is a real thing, and that's what it looks like on the outside. But on the inside, it often feels more like mental traffic and emotional overload. Everything's jammed up. There's too many thoughts trying to get through one narrow line or lane, I guess I should say. And and that's why it's so exhausting. It's not just that the task isn't done, it's that you're carrying the task in your mind all day long. You're paying interest on something that you haven't even started yet. Let that sit for a minute. So before we try to fix the behavior, we have to understand what's actually creating the resistance, okay? And one of the first things that I want to challenge is the idea that this is laziness, because it is not. Most of the people that I work with are not lazy. A lot of times they're the opposite. They're ambitious, they're busy, they care deeply, they have big ideas, big responsibilities, big expectations for themselves. The problem is that they also have a very full brain, too many tabs open, too many decisions, too many people needing something, too many projects half started, too much emotional pressure attached to getting it right. So when your brain gets overloaded, it doesn't always respond by rising to the occasion. Sometimes it responds by freezing, you know, avoiding, distracting, or shutting down. And that can be especially frustrating for entrepreneurs and professionals because you may be very capable in one area and then feel completely stuck in another. You can show up for a client, a deadline, or someone else's emergency, but then you might struggle to follow through on your own important priorities. And this is not laziness. This is a sign that your brain needs less shame and more support, more structure, more clarity. Pressure can shut your brain down. So we live in a world where information is everywhere, but knowledge is not the same as execution. Um, and more advice is not always the answer. You know, you can find a podcast, a book, a course, a YouTube video, and now even ask AI for almost any strategy that you need, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. So for most people, the problem is not that they don't have access to information. The problem is that the information by itself doesn't create implementation. Knowing what to do and doing it consistently require different parts of the system. You need clarity, you need emotional capacity, you need energy, you need a realistic plan, you need an environment that supports focus. And sometimes you need accountability. And this is why, buying another planner does not automatically solve the problem. Getting another app, the planner may be beautiful. The app may be really cool. The strategy may be brilliant. But if the system does not reduce resistance in your brain at the moment of action, it's not going to get used consistently because you have to be able to get started on something, right? So instead of asking, what else do I need to learn? Because that's the default a lot of times. We just, oh, I'll just watch this video. A better question might be, what's missing between knowing and doing? What's missing between knowing and doing? That missing piece is what we're going to start identifying today. So let me describe what I call the overwhelm cycle. It usually starts with too much input, too many tasks, too many notifications, too many ideas, too many obligations, decisions, open loops, too many things that feel urgent. And your brain tries to hold all of it at once. And then everything starts to feel equally important. You know what I mean? If everything matters, nothing stands out clearly. It makes it hard to prioritize and it creates decision fatigue. And then the pressure rises. You feel behind before you even begin. And when the task list feels emotionally expensive, then your brain starts to look for relief. When there's not enough clear next steps, your brain might look for relief in things like scrolling. It might look like checking email. It might look like reorganizing your desk. Um, I mean, the other day I needed to do something. I decided I'm going to wash my curtains. What? Who even does that? I don't think I've washed the curtains in years, but I just decided that seemed easier and more fun than the hard thing that I needed to be doing that took concentration and effort. So I don't know about you, but we look for relief. Um, and so a lot of times it looks like doing a smaller task that feels productive, but it doesn't actually move the needle. It doesn't move the most important thing forward in your business or your life. And then the day ends and the important thing is still undone. And then the shame gets added to tomorrow's task list, you know? That's the cycle. And the way out is not to beat yourself up. The way out is to interpret this, I mean, not interpret, interrupt, excuse me, interpret what's going on is what I was trying to say, and interrupt the cycle earlier. Uh, and you do that with clarity and smaller, more doable action. And this is one of the biggest pieces people miss. Sometimes the task itself is not actually that hard, but the feelings attached to the task are heavy. That's what feels hard. Sending an email, may only take 5 minutes, but if the email involves conflict or disappointment or selling or asking for help or the possibility of being ignored, you know, suddenly that 5 minute task carries a lot more emotional weight. Are you tracking with me? Everybody understand? If you're on here live, say hi in the chat. Let me know. Starting a project, for example, may not feel technically difficult, but if you're afraid it's not going to be good enough, or you're worried that people will judge it, or you don't know exactly how to begin, then the brain might interpret that task as a threat instead of neutral action. And that's why procrastination a lot of times is emotional. It's about emotional regulation. Does that make sense? Avoiding the task gives quick relief. And for a moment, you don't have to feel the discomfort, right? But unfortunately, avoidance does not remove the task. It just delays it. And you know that, and I know that. And usually it adds guilt on top. So the question becomes, how can we make the emotional cost of starting smaller so that it's easier to start? That's where tiny steps become powerful. This strategy has really helped me, um, because perfectionism is one of the sneakiest forms of procrastination because it sounds responsible. Well, I'm just trying to get it right. Excellence is important, you know. But perfectionism says, I just need to think about this a little longer. I need a better plan. I need more clarity. I'll start when I can do it right. All that sounds good, right? Do you agree? Now, planning is not bad. I love a good plan. But there's a point where planning stops being preparation and it starts becoming protection. Let me say that again. There's a point where planning stops being preparation and starts becoming protection. Sometimes what we're really trying to protect ourselves from is uncertainty. We want to know it's going to work before we begin. Now, if you are a business person, if you're an entrepreneur, that's not the way it works out, is it? We want to know that nobody will criticize us before we throw it out there. We want to know that we won't waste time. We want to know that we'll finish it perfectly. All of that causes us to wait, but clarity usually doesn't come before action. That's the sneaky thing. Clarity does not, you can't wait until you're clear and then act, because clarity usually does not come before action. Clarity comes through action. Clarity comes through action. You learn by moving. You get feedback by trying. You discover the next step after you take the first step. I struggled with this when I first started in business because I guess I'm kind of a control freak. I don't know. But I wanted to know everything before I started. And I was uncomfortable moving, taking what they call messy action because it didn't feel right. but that's what you have to do because the clarity comes through action. You get feedback by trying, and then you discover the next step after you take the first step. All of the steps are not going to be laid out ahead of time. Maybe sometimes they will, but usually not. So instead of asking, how can I do this perfectly? Try asking, what would be a good enough first version? What would a good enough first version look like? What would that look like where I could get it out there, get some feedback, and then make changes, iterate. A lot of people believe that they need to feel motivated before they can begin, but motivation is unreliable. Now, I have all these sayings. My coaching clients, we call them Cindyisms. One of them is progress before perfection, um, progress over perfection. And then another one is waiting on motivation is never a good strategy because motivation doesn't have to be there before you get started. Motivation is not reliable. It changes based on sleep, stress, hormones, emotions, environment, interruptions, and what happened 5 minutes before you sat down to work. Am I right? So if your entire productivity system depends on feeling motivated, you will constantly feel like you're starting over. This is why structure matters so much. Structure is not about being rigid. Structure is about giving your brain a path to follow when your feelings are not cooperating. Think about brushing your teeth. You probably don't wait for a burst of inspiration. You do it because there's a routine. There's a cue, there's a pattern. You don't think about it. It becomes automatic. Important work needs that same kind of support, not pressure, not shame, but support. The goal is to make starting easier and smaller and more automatic. So you're not relying on this magic feeling to show up first before you get started. So systems carry you when feelings don't. Now, your brain wants easy wins. Your brain is wired to seek reward and relief. That is normal. That is common. This matters because meaningful work does not always feel rewarding at the beginning. Keep that in mind. A big project may feel vague at first. A hard conversation might feel uncomfortable. A sales follow-up may feel make you feel vulnerable. Um, and risk you have to risk failure, risk rejection. Creating content may bring up self-doubt. Meanwhile, things like checking email gives you this quick hit of completion. Scrolling gives you that novelty and that your brain is seeking. Organizing something gives you visible progress. Answering easy messages lets you feel productive without facing the heavier thing. And again, this does not mean that you're not disciplined. It means that your brain is doing what brains do. It's choosing the option with the easiest reward and the lowest emotional risk. So the solution is not to shame your brain. The solution is to make meaningful work more approachable. That means you have to make the first step smaller. It may mean adding a timer. It may mean removing distractions before you begin. It may mean pairing the task with accountability. So we're not trying to force your brain, you're trying to guide it. Um, Now, let's talk about decision fatigue. Decision fatigue is a huge part of why people know what to do, but they still don't do it. Every unfinished task is an open loop. Every open loop in your brain asks something of your brain. It says, don't forget me. Got to hold this in here, figure me out, decide what to do with me. And so that's going on in your head. And when you sit down to work and you still have to decide what matters most, where to start, how long it's going to take, what step comes first, what to do if you get interrupted, all of that, then your brain has already spent energy before the work even begins. And this is why vague tasks are so dangerous. You don't want to, don't put on your list, work on website. That's vague. Um, how about write the first draft of the about page for 20 minutes? That's specific and it's clear. The clearer the next step, then the less energy it takes to begin, less mental energy, less emotional energy. So, one of the best gifts that you can give your future self is a specific next action. Not a giant project, not a wish, but a next action. Because look at all these questions on the slide. When all of that's going on in your head, um, choosing the next small step just zoop, just brings it all down into clarity. Now, I love goals. I love vision. I love planning. But sometimes the plan becomes so big that it scares the brain away from the starting line. Do you know what I mean? You decide you're going to completely overhaul your schedule, clean out your office, write the book, launch the offer, post every day, exercise every morning, finally become the optimized version of yourself by next Tuesday. And your brain says, no, I don't think so. And this is why tiny starts matter. A tiny start is not a commitment to your future. It's just a doorway. It's a passageway. It's a step. You're not trying to finish the entire thing in one dramatic burst. You're trying to create entry. Does that make sense? Uh, um, Instead of write the report, how about open the document? Write the messy outline, clear one stack, send one message, work for 10 minutes, and then the timer goes off. Tiny action lowers the emotional cost of beginning. Getting started is the hardest part sometimes. And once you begin, the momentum has something to build on. And remember, the start is often the hardest part. So make the start smaller. Make it easier for you to get started by breaking it up into tiny little steps. Um, so how do we, excuse me, how do we close that gap between knowing and doing? Well, we build what I like to call an action bridge. An action bridge has a few simple parts. First, you clarify the target, like what actually matters right now, not what could matter, not what everybody else wants. What matters most in this season, this week, this day, this work block? And then, second, is shrink the first step. If your brain is resisting, the step is probably too vague, too big, or too emotionally loaded. So make it smaller until it feels like, almost too easy to begin. And then third, protect the focus window. And this means reducing distractions before you start instead of trying to be heroic in the middle of temptation. Silence the phone, close the extra tabs, decide what you will not do during that window. And then fourth, add support. Add support. This might not, that might be accountability, a body double, a coach, a timer, a checklist, or just a simple rhythm that helps you restart. This is not about forcing yourself. It's about building a bridge that your brain can actually cross. There's a little bit of psychology to this. And one of the simplest ways to reduce overwhelm is to ask what I call the one thing question. What is the one thing that would make today feel meaningful? One thing. Not perfect, not wildly productive, not impressive to everybody else, but just meaningful. That question helps me. It cuts through the noise because let's be honest, most to-do lists are a mixture of urgent things, important things, random things, old things, other people's things, and things we wrote down 3 weeks ago and we don't even really care about anymore. And so when everything is competing for attention, your brain needs a filter. The one thing question helps you choose a direction. Once you know the one thing, the next question is, what's the smallest visible step I can take toward that one thing? That combination is powerful. One meaningful priority and one small visible step. And this is how momentum starts to feel possible again. So here's something I really want you to take with you. Progress beats perfect consistency. Progress over perfection. So many people think the goal is to create a system that they'll never fall off of, but that is not real life. You're going to get interrupted. You're going to have low energy days. You're going to have unexpected problems. You're going to forget the plan sometimes. The real skill is not never going off track. The real skill is learning how to return without turning one difficult day into 3 difficult weeks. So when you get off track, you do not need a character assassination. You need a restart plan. So just slow down, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, what happened? What got in the way? Was the task too vague? Was the time block too long? Did I need support? Was I trying to do too many things at once? Answer those questions to get some clarity and then choose the next tiny step. Tiny step. Momentum grows when you learn to return quickly and kindly. So restart without drama, learn from the friction, and keep the next step small. I just want to close with this. If you know what to do, but you still don't do it, that does not mean that you're broken. It does not mean that you're lazy. It does not mean that you don't care. It usually means that there's a gap between the intention and the support system. So you may need less shame and more clarity, less pressure and smaller starts, fewer decisions and better routines, less mental clutter, more protected focus, less isolation, more support. You do not have to beat yourself up, bully yourself into becoming a more productive person. That doesn't work. In fact, it usually backfires. You can learn to work with your brain. You can build a system that helps you choose what matters. It helps you start faster, recover sooner, and follow through more consistently. If you need help with this is what I do. I help people with this all day, every day. Reach out. We'll chat to see if coaching might be a good fit for you. But remember, it starts with one small intentional step. Now, if you are watching this the day that I'm here speaking to you, then tomorrow is the day of my next live free masterclass. So I'll put the sign up in the comment section. If you're watching this later, that registration link will still work for whatever the next date is because I do these on a regular basis and they're on Zoom and it's just a great time to dive in deeper in some of these topics. So I thank you so much for being here today. I hope this has helped you. I hope most of all that this has helped you to see that the problem is not you. The problem is the system, and the system can be changed. So if you are watching this on Monday, May 25th, I do want to take a few moments to honor those who have given their life to secure our freedom in our country, the United States of America. Um, we have gratitude for the families who have lost a loved one in the line of service, and we appreciate you, we see you, we honor you. So I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope you sign up for the masterclass, and I will see you next time.